Please subscribe to this channel for more videos related to Catholic Christian teaching. Many non-Catholic Christians do not embrace the teaching on good deeds as earning credit for our place in heaven as outlined in the books of Tobit and Sirach. However, it seems hard to deny that Jesus teaches a similar idea in the Gospels. As in the texts from the two books cited, almsgiving is often identified as an act that fills a heavenly treasury. In the story from Matthew chapter 19, Jesus tells the rich young man, "If you would be perfect, go sell what you possess and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come, follow me." In Luke, Jesus advises, "Sell your possessions and give alms. Provide yourselves with purses that do not grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys." Closely associated with all of this is another concept in the Gospels we have already mentioned: the understanding of salvation as a reward. In a study of economic imagery in the Gospel of St. Matthew, it is shown that the standard English translations can mask the commercial language used over and over again by Jesus. English Bibles since the King James Version generally render the Greek words misthos and the verb apodynanomi as reward. Yet, in today's usage, reward implies that the recompense God gives is unrelated to an employer or to a creditor's relationship. This is misleading. A careful look at Matthew's Gospel, this is precisely the terminology intended. Indeed, misthos, almost always translated as reward, clearly carries the meaning of wage. At the time of the King James Version was translated, the English word reward was used synonymously with wage, that is, the financial remuneration of a laborer. In fact, in the parable of the workers in Matthew chapter 20, it is precisely this word, misthos, that occurs in verse 8. "And when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, 'Call the laborers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last up to the first.'" In the parable of the workers, the owner of a vineyard hires workers at different points during a day. At the end of it, he says, "Call the laborers and pay them their wages," misthos. Those who had worked from the beginning of the day become angry when the owner gives those who started working at the 11th hour the same wage they received. The owner defends himself, saying, "Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity?" Much could be said there about this parable, but there are two things to be highlighted here. First, the parable is clearly about the kingdom of heaven. Given the usage of the concept in Matthew, it seems difficult to deny that here we have a teaching that relates to salvation. Second, given the first point, the parable teaches that salvation is given as a wage. Indeed, all were paid for doing some work. None were paid for not working at all. It is pointed out by some scholar that the story is best read in light of what immediately precedes it, the story of the rich young man who, unlike the disciples, refused to leave all his possession and follow Jesus. The story likely functions as an extended answer to the disciples' question, who then can be saved? While the young man has kept the commandments, Jesus suggests that technically the man has not done enough to be perfect. The apostles who have left everything have done much more. Nonetheless, by placing the parable of the workers immediately after this story, Matthew provides us with hope for the man. God is a merciful judge. In sum, Jesus teaches salvation is not simply the result of a cold calculation of credits and debits. Wages are paid out in connection with labor, but not in strict proportion to labor. The parable thus teaches the necessity of works alongside the generosity of God in paying out more than was earned. A similar idea is found in the parable of the talents in Matthew chapter 25. There once again, we find divine judgment described in terms of financial imagery. This time we hear about a master who returns from a trip to collect money he has entrusted to his servants. Notable, the different servants who invested wisely each end up with a different amount. The first has 11 talents and the second only 4. In fact, in Luke's version, this prompts a protest from the servant. Suffice it to say, the parable does not support the idea that in the end all receive same recompense. In addition, it is noteworthy that God rewards His servants with abundance. It is this kind of economic imagery that is obviously in play in Matthew chapter 16. For the Son of Man is to come with His angels in the glory of His Father, and then He will repay every man for what he has done. It is likewise no wonder that Jesus describes the final judgment in terms of the setting of accounts. Moreover, the sheer volume of passages describing salvation as a wage, misthos, in Matthew is alone overwhelming. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? Beware of practicing your piety before men in order to be seen by them. For then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give alms, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by men. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. As when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by men. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Put simply, to argue that Scripture teaches that salvation is the result of faith alone, and that works themselves are not rewarded with salvation, flies in the face of Jesus' teaching. One can only come to this conclusion through a tortured reading that obscures these texts' plain sense by imposing on them the preconceived theological ideas. Please go to YouTube Retimentality channel, playlist, Apologetics for the complete series of these materials.